help. Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf today with a pitch to give some Pennsylvania residents a little extra cash at a time when they're paying extra for essentials.
People need help right now, and we can afford to do this as a Commonwealth right now.
Wolf said Democrats are making another run at a plan to send households making up to $80,000.
Governor Gretchen Whitmer has pushed hard for this increase, and Republican leaders in the state have floated the same idea. The package includes a $500 rebate for individuals with an income of less than $125,000 and joint fathers making less than $250,000 as well. Another one of the bills would repeal the retirement tax in the state. Earlier this year, Governor Whitmer said repealing the state retirement tax ban, repealing the retirement plan would save 500,000 Michigan households an average of $1,000 per year. Senate Republican Shelley Moore Capito has introduced separate legislation to overhaul the permitting process for energy projects, as Democrats debate a similar proposal agreed on by Chuck Schumer and Manchin. Capito said the ranking member of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee presented a bill as necessary to give industry regulatory certainty. She also said the proposal would expedite the completion of the Mountain Valley Pipeline, a project set to run through West Virginia. Manchin has made the competition of the pipeline a major priority, and the summary of the side deal reached with Schumer includes removing several obstacles to the goal. Senator Capito said in a statement, since our calls for action and offers to see legislative text from permitting the deal remain unheeded, Republicans are introducing this bill today to deliver solutions to roadblocks, delays, and postponements of key infrastructure projects across the country. House Natural Resources Committee Chairman Raul led more than 70 House Democrats in a letter asking House leadership not to include Manchin's measure in stopgap funding that will prevent a government shutdown. Senior citizens can now expect a Social Security COLA increase of around 10%. New details of the annual boost to Social Security benefits have been released. Millions of recipients can expect to get a huge increase on payments. So here's your daily news, everybody. Last year, the Social Security Administration announced a massive 5.9% cost of living adjustment for all benefit payments in 2022. This represented a boost of $93 for the average recipient and was the most significant increase offered by the Social Security Administration. In nearly 40 years, that was in response to the sky-high rate of inflation recorded in the second half of 2021. But that trend was continued through this year, and experts are expecting another bumper increase. An analysis suggests that the COLA increase for 2023 could be close to 10% if inflation does continue to rise. The COLA increase is calculated using the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, and is based only on the third quarter of the year. Data for August and September have not yet been released, but the year-on-year inflation figure for July was 8.5%. If inflation were to rise by 0.6% in August and September. Now, earlier this month, a survey from the New York Federal Reserve showed that Americans now believe that inflation will cool, a significant turning point in the economic recovery. The monthly survey of economic and consumer expectations showed that respondents anticipate that inflation will run at 6.2% over the next year. The shift in consumers' expectations is a critical role, and a real one in a volatile economy, because the belief that prices will rise often pushes up inflation further. The fall in gas prices from their mid-June peak has undoubtedly began a key contributing fact in the downward trend, and the price of motor fuel has had a direct effect on the household finances of consumers, and is also factored into the transport costs associated with the vast majority of goods. And if you're a lower or moderate earner, you may not have enough to worry about Social Security wage gaps. So is your state or city sending out 4th stimulus checks? Well, I know many of you are wondering whether you can claim extra stimulus money, and here's what you have to know.
Changing, where is this going?
Well, you have to go over and ask that in the Senate. But we do believe that what we call the For the People Act, and now called the Freedom to Vote Act, is a bill that very much had.
An Illinois Democrat who is seeking to retain a seat in the House this November in the midterms recently claimed that the funding for the IRS is going towards resources that the agency needs. And Jenny Allen and Chuck Reddick, who were appointed by the former president, insist that the additional enforcement funds will target the wealthy and not middle-class taxpayers.
I'll tell you who built America, the middle class. And the people who built the middle class are organized labor, unions. That's not hyperbole. That's a fact. That's a straight fact. The executive order I'm going to sign today is going to help ensure that we build a better America, we build it right, and we build it on time, and we build it cheaper than it would have been otherwise. You know, the executive order is making sure that federal construction projects get completed on time and under budget.
Now, this new money will help to reverse more than a decade of underfunding of the IRS. The IRS budget was cut sharply during the 2010s and remains about 20% below its 2010 level. The Inflation Reduction Act provides $80 billion over 10 years for the IRS to rebuild and train its staff and make long-term investments in computer systems which are already out of date. The added funding is necessary to fill a large budget hole from a decade of cuts and enable the IRS to fulfill its core responsibilities of helping taxpayers navigate the tax system and enforcing the nation's tax laws. So new information has just been released by Congress. The IRS has released some very important announcements. Millions of you guys can expect to receive some bonus relief payments this month.
And by the way, there are a lot of jobs coming to people that you're going to need to train up people, thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Everybody knew and you heard from my secretary a little bit earlier, America's falling behind in infrastructure.
But there is a deadline. Taxpayers have just a few weeks left to claim this money. And so, here is some big news. The IRS is sending refunds to more than 1 million Americans who filed their taxes late in the early days of the crisis. But there is a new deadline. The agency has announced that taxpayers have until September 30th to take advantage of this new relief. Typically, people who file their taxes late without requesting an extension can expect to pay penalties of up to 25% of the amount of taxes that they owe. For 2019-2020, however, the agency is suspending taxes or the penalty for those taxes for late filers. Taxpayers who have already paid a fine will automatically be given refunds, the IRS said. And more than 1.6 million people are set to receive refunds or credits totaling $1 billion. This is an average of $700 per person. Although some of you guys may get more and some may get less. The IRS said taxpayers who have already filed their returns don't need to do anything. If you've been notified of a fine but have not yet paid it, the penalty will be erased, and while those who have already paid a penalty will receive a refund or credit, most of the refunds will be delivered by the end of this month. So that's some good news to look forward to. And according to the IRS, taxpayers who have yet to file returns for 2019 and 2020 can still have penalties forgiven, as long as their returns are filed by September 30th, 2022. That gives late filers just over 2 weeks to wrap up outstanding returns. Now the effort is to move to help struggling taxpayers affected by the crisis, and the plan can also help the agency, which is struggling to dig itself out of a massive backlog of unprocessed tax returns. In a notice, the IRS said the crisis had an unprecedented effect on the tax agency, highlighting the agency's roles in distributing stimulus payments and taking other steps to help taxpayers weather the crisis. Dropping late filing penalties could also benefit the IRS by helping the agency focus on whittling down its backlog of tax paperwork and returning to normal for the 2023 tax season. Several House Democrats are facing tough re-election bids, as well as one